Good evening, everyone. Hope you had a great weekend. Welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I'll be filling in for Tucker unless I misread the schedule. From Berkeley to Portland, Antifa demonstrators got violent over the weekend again. We got the video. You're looking at some of it now. We'll have more of that in just a moment. But first, it isn't just Antifa that's losing its mind in every respect. You got liberal office holders and candidates. They're moving fast to the left. Democratic Senator Brian Schatz, for example, of Hawaii, he's publicly announced his support for New York Times writer Sarah Jeong in her racist, anti-white, anti-cop tweets. In Arizona, gubernatorial candidate David Garcia wants voters to imagine a world where anybody can enter freely from Mexico.
I want to just take a second and imagine. Let's just imagine. Just imagine no wall in southern Arizona.
Yeah, can you imagine that nightmare? In New York, gubernatorial candidate Cynthia Nixon, yes, she's legitimately running still, says it's time for the Democratic Party to overtly push socialism, and others on the left seem on board.
The establishment is terrified of that word, socialism. But if we learned one thing from the Obama years, it's that Republicans are going to call us socialists no matter what we do. So we might as well give them the real thing.
I think this is going to be, though, a big debate point on that Democratic primary stage in 2020, isn't it?
I don't even think it's going to be a debate point. You either embrace the label and own it and be a player, or you can be like Andrew Cuomo and be off in the sidelines.
You believe this? It's like the Republican Party is getting the gift that keeps on giving. Nixon's New York Democratic colleague, Attorney General candidate Zephyr Teachout, that's her actual name, wants to prosecute ICE.
ICE has to be abolished. And I say that as somebody who's running for one of the top law enforcement jobs in the country. And as Attorney General, I will continue to speak out against ICE. I will prosecute ICE for their criminal acts.
I'm embarrassed for her. And conservative lawmakers, office holders, and ordinary Trump supporters continue to face harassment from those heeding the call of Congresswoman Maxine Waters. Remember?
If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
Columnist Mark Stein here. Mark, there are times when you have to really split hairs to find out where the problem is. We don't have to split hairs here. Where do you start? First off, socialism. Let's just embrace it.
Right. Right. You know, 20 years ago, during the Clinton era, when you watched campaign ads, the Democrats all ran as pseudo-conservatives. That I'm Fred Smith. I'm tough on crime. I believe in and you had to wait to the end to find out whether this was a Republican or a Democrat pretending to be tough on crime and all the rest of it. And I can understand that's frustrating. And they want to let their inner leftist out. And if you look at the last election cycle, one of the problems with the Democrat Party is that moderate Democrats, centrism got associated with the Clinton kleptocracy. Hillary is just someone whose turn it was and was running a phony baloney foundation that's some kind of racket for getting like seven-figure sums from layabout Saudi princes for doing nothing. And that tainted centrism and all the romance on the Democratic Party. You saw with Cynthia Nixon. All the romance is on the far left, and they're moving farther and farther left at an extraordinary rate.
Well, you have that 28-year-old who upset Joe Crowley, and now she's the rock star without any legitimate substance. No. She lives in fear of the follow-up question, any topic.
But you see, that's like the old, I can't remember whether it's Lenin or Stalin, who, famous line, whom. In an age of identity politics, what matters is which side of that you are. Are you the approved designated group, as that young lady is, or in the ICE dispute, for example, the reason they don't like ICE is because ICE detains illegal immigrants. I don't particularly like the immigrant. Anyone who's been through legal immigration isn't fond of the immigration bureaucracy. But for the Democrats, it's simple. They like illegal immigrants, so therefore the people on the other side of that question, the immigration enforcers, are the bad guys.
So there's a lot of law enforcement officials in families. If you don't have one directly in your family, you have one related to you, might even be a good friend of yours. When you say abolish ICE, that hits home everywhere.
Yeah.
In what country is that a good political thing to do? And some Democrats, I think, are worried about the abolish ICE move. And I'll add something to that. 9 out of every 10 arrests through ICE are people with criminal records. What's your problem with that?
Well, the reason the leftists are keen on that is because they don't care about that. Just so you listen to that guy who's running for governor in Arizona, and he's saying, imagine a world where anybody can enter from Mexico. There's a name for that world. It's Mexico. If you let anybody enter from Mexico, you become Mexico. The border moves north, and eventually it's at the Canadian border, and you're all Mexico.
I thought the debate was between the fence, the drones, or the solid-state wall. The debate is now for open or all in?
No, because again, that's like the old school Democrats. Yes, of course I believe in border enforcement once we have the amnesty and we legalize these hardworking people who just want... And it gets frustrating to have to do that. So it's much easier to let your inner open borders side out. Their open borders, their identity politics, they've had it with the whole Clinton thing of pretending to be, they don't want sister soldier moments, any of that anymore. They don't want to triangulate. They don't want all the equivocations. I think they, at a certain level, they actually feel dirty from living with those accommodations. And the last time round, Bernie Sanders, if it had been a free nominating process, would have won, because that's where the party is.
$31 trillion for Medicare for all. You had this woman from New York who's going to get the seat that Joe Crowley had come out and say, we're going to essentially get rid of the $700 billion to give to the military in order to fan that out and pay for all her social programs.
No, that's the fascinating thing, because if you look at genuinely socialist countries, the average European social democracy in Scandinavia or whatever, they pay for their socialism. What you have here is actually a fantasy socialism where they think none of these trillion-dollar sums mean anything, so let's just give even more and more trillions to everybody.
Mark Stein will be filling in for Tucker on Wednesday. Until then, Mark, I'll see you in the halls. I'll say hello, but it will never be the same. Okay.
Let's build that fence and keep you out next time.
Thank you very much. So he's turned on me already. Meanwhile, let's change gears. Teslin Figueroa is a former Bernie Sanders staffer and founder of Teslin Figueroa, the communications group, and she joins us right now. Teslin, first off, when it comes to some of the mania around what's happening right now, where do you think the Democratic Party is heading?
Well, I mean, clearly they're probably heading over a cliff if we continue to watch the way you have the divide between the left and the center Democrats. You know, it's just amazing. You know, I tell people all the time, look at the resume of the candidates that are actually talking. Look at those elected officials that are actually talking. For 20, 30 years, they've been in the center. And now all of a sudden, because Senator Sanders appears to be the most popular politician in the U.S., now all of a sudden everybody is a socialist. But even Senator Sanders has what we call in the church backslid and went from saying abolish ICE one moment and then not abolish ICE and then back to abolish ICE, or we should refocus, what they call re-examine ICE. So it's just really all over the place. People don't understand where people are going, what position that they take. And even if I disagree because I'm not a socialist, even though I work for Senator Sanders, I respect people who are consistent. And what we're seeing now is inconsistencies all across the board.
No one ever said Bernie Sanders was inconsistent or inauthentic. He's very authentic. That was part of his allure, as is President Trump. That was why it would have been an interesting matchup, because they're so different in their philosophies. So let's move ahead. If you are somebody who studies history in America, you know this is supposed to be a big wave for Democrats. They seem to, with these two policies in particular, doing everything they can to get rid of that wave. Do you look personally, from what you see right now, do you look for them to pick up the 23 seats to gain the House, despite what we just went over?
Well, you know, it might be a wave in some primary states, you know, in some areas, but it also could be a flood that could drown everybody out in 2020. You know, people have to pay attention to what works in a primary, what works in one particular district, like Ms. Cortez's district, may not work necessarily around the country. Democrats and Republicans, the majority are in the center. And if Democrats keep thinking that everybody is just a socialist or everybody is all the way left, then they're misinformed. I work for Senator Sanders, yet I'm not a socialist. So if they keep trying to box everybody up in one box and try to say that this is just the direction that everybody's going and not really get to the ideas and figure out what people really want and pay attention to the polls, then we'll be in trouble.
Teslins, right now we know the economy's going great, but if you want people to keep some of that money, don't raise health care costs. And I'm not saying point a finger at any party or any person. The party that understands health care and delivers quality health care at affordable prices will be in power. If you want to get to the kitchen table in America, it's still health care.
Well, I can say for myself personally, for me and my daughter, it's over $430 being self-employed to cover insurance for myself. And I talk about it all the time. When I had a staffing firm with 300 employees in Orlando, we went out of business because they were forcing temporary agencies to cover health care. So it's still an issue that has not been resolved. Although we like to hear the word reform, it is yet to be actually completed and actually providing good health care for people such as myself. So you're absolutely right. Something has to be done about it. And if we can remove the partisan politics and actually have a real conversation on what does that mean for people like myself and small business, then we can be headed in the right direction.
And Teslin, lastly, just throw out two names that you think, you hope will be front runners and run for president on the left if you had your druthers.
Well, what I can tell you is just because I work for Senator Sanders doesn't mean that he'll automatically get my vote. I'm looking to start all the way from scratch. Let them line up, let's get 10, 12 candidates. I tell people all the time, pick a side or step aside. And so what I'm looking to see is candidates actually be consistent on their message and not 1 minute is one thing. Like today, Kamala Harris said that she doesn't believe in identity politics when the Democrats have been running on identity politics for the last several decades. So right now I'm just confused. So I'm interested to see who all's going to come out, all of the frontliners as well as people that we may not have heard of, but not just anybody because they fit what appears to be popular, but actually some real substance behind it as well. All
right, you're going to have a crowded stage, I sense, come nomination time, and it'll be all about that
Hopefully
after the midterms.
So.
Teslin, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And best luck with your company. Meanwhile, straight ahead, the media is melting down.